The Atheist Paradox. This talk will be about God's omniscience and mankind's free will. The Atheist Paradox of free will questions how can man have free will if God is omniscient? Or, as they will ask, if everything is part of God's plan, how is man free to make his or her own choices? First of all, let's make a schemata. Draw one straight line of any length, put a circle at one end, and now put a circle at the other end. Make a dot somewhere along the straight line. Then draw an arrow from the left circle pointing right, and another arrow from the right circle pointing left. The circles represent God. The line is time and the dot is a person. The arrows represent the perspective of God. So God is looking forward through time and back through time. Or this is how atheists think of God. The question is, then, how does God make a plan, seeing forward and knowing everything in advance, and looking backward, knowing what happened or will happen, and still allow man free will? Another way of saying this is, how can man traverse time, travel through time, and yet avoid the gaze of God, who is looking through time and back through time? But that is like saying or asking, how can a pea in a totally enclosed box escape the box, when the question has already supposed that escape is impossible? Atheists do this also with their demand for evidence for God. When their standards for the evidence, the threshold that a believer must reach, has eliminated any possibility of evidence. First of all, how do we know where we are on the time scale? Our position is dependent on our perception. What if we have already lived out our life and are now remembering what we did in sequence? God's plan could have been made in response to things we have already done. Liberals also think God's knowledge is oppressive. God is not following behind your consciousness nor leading it. He's not deciding you will think about blinking your eye prior to your blink, and He's not controlling the atoms of your body so that they configure in a certain way that we see as your thumb moving. If your choices move atoms, would the movement of atoms by God make choices for you? God is not looking through time nor back at time. He is looking above time at time. But why are we comfortable with the origins of the stars being determined by an event that happened trillion years ago, but perplexed that our salvation was known before we were born? The point is, the outcome is known by God, not us. We can puzzle over this fact as much as we wish, but we still come back to the reality we have to live out our lives in time and in logic and in sequence. God is not constrained by either time or logic. It is not logical that we would know the end and still be free to choose our end, and that is because we are not God. Even were there an infinite number of ends, God would still know all of them, and we would still be free, even if the path we are on is laid out for us in every detail, and God has preordained the outcome of this one path. We are still free from our perspective and within the constraints and context of our own personal life. The problem for liberals is that they are not free in the way they wish to be. Man has free will precisely because God is omniscient. What people do not grasp is that perhaps in their world, whatever they choose is irrelevant to God and His plan. The plan of the Canadians at Vimy Ridge, Canadian Army, did not hinge on what was happening in Thailand, even if nothing was known about Thailand by the Canadians, and the Canadians or the Taiwanese operated totally independent of anything the Canadian High Command decided. It would not have changed the plan or the outcome. What Thailand does not impact the Canadian plan. This might come as a shocker to atheists, but God is not directing your life, nor is He interested in its outcome. God is the author of truth, not of chaos. God's plan is for His world and His people, not for liberals. In God's world, His people do what is right, and what is right is predictable, and it does lead to a foreseeable result. We do not have to have free will we do have free will concerning whether we wish to be part of God's plan or not, and if we wish to help to bring it about. But this is in God's plan. If we wish to remain out of God's plan, that does not impact the outcome of God's plan.